This video shows the process for creating a simple gear that you might have in a toy that's made out of plastic. So it's going to look like this when we're done, but we'll go ahead and we'll start with a new design. And first thing I am going to do is get rid of the dude, because he's not really needed at the moment. And we're going to start off with a couple things. First of all, we're going to look at our model settings. So we'll look at our model info. We're going to be working in millimeters, although we're going to design the gear fairly large and we can reduce it down later. We'll scale it down later. The display precision, I'm going to go to 0.00 and do the same on the length snapping. And I think that's the only essential. Oh, on angle units, I think our precision there, yeah, 1 decimal place is probably sufficient. And the angle snapping is probably set at 1. We'll leave it at that, okay? To get started, we're going to draw a circle. Now, I've done some measurements in advance, so I know exactly what I want to be making here. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw a circle, starting at the origin, and it goes out, and I'm going to enter in a radius of 994.72. Remember, down in the lower right-hand corner, you see the numbers that I'm typing in, and that sets the radius for this circle, so I do that. Now, the next thing I'm going to do, if we zoom in here a little bit, you can see that circle is very chunky. So if I change and select the object, so I've got the select tool, I select the curve, and I go to entity information, you can see I've got there's the radius that I created, but it's only got 24 segments. So I'm going to change that to 128, and you'll see as soon as I do that, these square sides will get to be much smoother. So that's a much better circle to be working with. Next thing I want to do is I want to make the teeth that I'm going to be having on my gear. So I'm going to switch to the rectangle tool. There's different ways you could do this, but I'm going to use the rectangle tool because I kind of like this. I'm going to draw a square that is 250 millimeters by 250 millimeters. So again, I'm just typing 250, 250, which makes a square. And now I'm going to use the line tool to go from one corner to the center of the top edge, and from the center of the top edge back down to the other corner. And then I'll use my erase tool. So that's our eraser there. And I'm just going to erase the pieces I don't need. So I end up with a nice triangle that's got 2 equal sides on it. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to group that. And the reason I'm grouping it is because when I'm going to move it close to the circle. And when I do that, I don't want it to stick to the circle right now. So by making it a group, it won't automatically stick to the circle. So I am going to select everything and say group it, and I'm going to call it tooth and create that. And then to help me out, I'm going to measure from one corner out to 125 millimeters. And so that gives me a little spot there. What that allows me to do then is when I move, I use the move tool to drag that object, and I want to leave it, I want to put it right where the edge of the circle meets the red axis. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to zoom in there a little more. And I can go ahead and erase that line that the measurement that I had made. So if I zoom back out here, you can see I've got one tooth around a circle. But obviously I want a whole bunch of teeth around the circle. In this case, I know that I need 25 teeth. Again, I've done all the math in advance. So the key then is how do I make all of those teeth around the perimeter? To do this, I'm going to use the rotate tool. You can see the rotation tool here. First of all, I'm going to select my triangular shape. Then I'll choose the rotate tool. And I'm going to click right in the center at the origin. And I'm going to scroll out until I reach my tooth. I'm going to click there, and if I move it, I'm just going to move it around the circle, right? But that's not what I want to do. However, if I now, once I've moved it, I press the Control key, and it makes a copy. So now I'm moving the copy rather than the original, and I'm going to set the angle at 14.4. And I can do that. Now I'm going to take 2 of them and repeat the process, because it's easier to move. I'll save some time if I'm moving 2 at a time. So now I'm going to move both of them with the control function so that I can press control so it duplicates. And now instead of going 14.4, I'm going to go 28.8. And now I've got my 2 teeth moved along there. Now I'm going to select all 4 teeth that I've got, and again use the rotation tool, click and start to move them, press the control key so that it gives me a copy, and this time I'm moving 4 times 14.4, which takes me to 57.6. Okay, so I've got everything. I've got all my teeth in place. I've got 25 teeth there. I'm just going to zoom in here so you start to see some things that are going on. So everything's not exactly perfect, but for what we're doing here, it doesn't necessarily need to be. However, we do need to kind of close up these gaps because that's going to get messy later on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask it to make this circle just a little bit bigger. So I'll go to Entity Information, and instead of 994.72, I'm going to change it to maybe 1003. And you can see that it's hitting both the corners, and we'll just take a quick look at some of the other corners. It should be all the same. And yeah, you can see it's hitting the corners. The next step now is to erase some lines so that everything starts to come together. Right now we can't go ahead and erase because everything is currently set up as an object. So if we try to erase there, it's going to take out whole big chunks of things, and that's not what we want. What we want to do is just get rid of those lines. So we're going to select everything and right-click on them and say Explode. That takes everything out of the groups or the components that they're in. Now we can use the Erase tool to start erasing some lines. So we've got our tooth pattern, but we're a little ways still from having a gear. Right now it's only one-dimensional, it's just flat. But we need to do a few other things to start to set it up for becoming the gear that we want it to. First thing we want to do is we want to put a hole in the center because it's going to need an axle. So we'll say that's 50 millimeters for the moment. Then you'll see how this is going to make sense a little bit later. We're going to put another circle that's at 100 millimeters. And then finally another circle that's at 900 millimeters. So we've got some concentric circles. First thing I do is delete that middle one because we don't need it. And now we want to start giving the whole thing some depth. So I'm going to go ahead and, you know what, before I do that, I'm just noticing that all my circles are kind of clunky. So I'm going to smooth those out. So I'm going to select that circle, change its entity information, change it to have 128 so it's a lot smoother. The inside ones, maybe change that to 64. And the very inside axle, 64 there as well. Okay, now we're going to give it some depth. I've got my circles drawn. I've smoothed them out nicely. I'm going to pull the outside up, and I'm going to pull it up 300 millimeters, so I type in that value. I'm going to pull up the center because I want to reinforce that axle, so I'm going to pull it up the same amount, so just make it in line there, and you can see it lines up at 300 millimeters. Now the problem, if I just do that, if we flip it over here, you'll see it's left a hole, right? Because we basically pulled that side and we pulled it away from its location. So instead of doing that, what we're going to do instead, undo that change with Control-Z, we're going to take our push-pull tool. As we start to move it, I'm going to press the Control key and let it go, and then I'll type in my 300. So it moves up the central axle to 300. But if we look underneath now, you can see that it left a copy of that. So it closes up the space. We now have a solid piece there. Next thing we want to do is move this up. So move this centerpiece up now 100. And then we're going to again move it, but this time I'm going to press the Control key after I start to move it and move it another 100. What that's done is it leaves us with, if we look underneath again, you'll see we've got this a layer there, and then 100 millimeters above it is this. So the whole tooth, the tooth here, the teeth are 300 millimeters thick. So the center part of the gear is only 100 millimeters thick, and the axle reinforcement is also 300. So once we've done that, now we can pretty much call our gear complete.